Hey there, this is Charles Amat, and welcome to Test-Driven Development in Unity. This is a series I've been wanting to kick off for quite a while. I got the idea from Eric Diedrich's Test-Driven Development Chess series, and like that series, I've pre-recorded my coding sessions and will be narrating over them. If you're not familiar with how it works, I'll basically be writing a feature and explaining what I'm doing as I go. The focus will be on Unity and test-driven development within Unity. Let's talk about the feature I'll be implementing, the heart container from Zelda Breath of the Wild. In Zelda Breath of the Wild, the player's health is represented by a heart container that consists of a maximum of 30 individual hearts. Each heart consists of 4 quarter heart pieces. The heart container depletes when the player takes damage and is replenished when the player consumes an item with a healing effect. So to get started, I need to figure out how I'm going to create this heart container in Unity. And I'm not talking from a code perspective. I need to figure out how exactly am I going to accomplish replenishing, depleting, adding hearts to this heart container from a graphical user interface perspective. So I have this sprite sheet that contains a heart sprite in various states of being filled. And I just start playing with what Unity provides. They have a sprite renderer, and here I'm actually playing with the UI image. This is the way I end up going, because I find that you can actually adjust the fill amount of the image in a way that works perfectly. As you see here, I'm going to play with this fill amount property, and the heart is filled radially, which actually looks just like it does in the game, minus some highlighting and some, different little effects. But really, this accomplishes exactly what I need. Initially, I thought maybe I would use the different sprites from the sprite sheet, but I got to thinking, how am I going to animate that? It seemed too difficult. This allows me to edit one field, the fill amount property of the image, the UI image class, in order to get the exact effect that I want. So I like this. I continue to build on it. Here I actually put the background, an empty heart. And this is, honestly, this is all just me trying to see the end product, trying to see the end goal. Now, test-driven development requires you to work in tiny little chunks as you progress your algorithm or progress your source code. But with Unity, it's such a visual thing. Game development is such a visual thing sometimes that, I just really wanted to see what is it going to look like, and I wanted to be able to achieve the effect that I wanted by hand so that I could work to automate it. And that's really what programming is. You have some task or effect or something that you want to complete. You could already complete it. It already has a process, but you want to make it more efficient. You want to make it done by a computer. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here. So this is my to-do list. You see that the heart consists of 4 quarter pieces. We have hearts that can be replenished, depleted. That's how I'm going to kick this whole thing off. Now, I don't have a heart class yet. So the first thing I need to do is create a failing test that will require me to create a heart class. So really my first step is I need to create heart tests, and that's what I do here. So I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup, and I'm going to update my to-do list. Now I have a vision for how this is going to look when it's done, and I have an idea of how I'm going to test that I'm doing it correctly, and that is I'm going to adjust the fill amount of the UI image. So each quarter heart piece is going to be represented by 0.25 fill amount, or 25% fill. So I add that to my to-do list, and I should be ready to shake and bake. Now, like I said before, I don't have a heart class, and I could go ahead and just create one because I know I need one, but if you really want to follow the test-driven development methodology to the T, you need to create a failing test first. So in order to tease out this health class, I'm going to create a test that causes me to create the health class in order to make it pass. I mean the heart class. So here I'm just mousing over hearts can be replenished because the first thing I'm going to test is the replenish method. This organizational method I'm going to use is something that I picked up from a blog post by Phil Hack. I'll put it in the blog in the description. Basically, you have your parent class that, like in this case, it's heart tests. That's my class under tests, is heart. And then I'm going to create multiple nested classes that are going to represent each method that I'm going to add to the heart test. In this case, I'm going to have a replenish method. So my first test, I kind of have an idea of what I want to test, but I'm not really sure 100% what it's going to look like, so I just call it test replenish for now, just to get something in. And I'm going to go assert first. So I'm going to say, what am I trying to prove here? Well, I want to prove that image.fillAmount is 0 at the end of all the things that I do. So what am I going to do? What I'm going to do is I'm going to call heart.replenish. Remember, heart doesn't exist and replenish doesn't exist, but that's okay. I'm going to create the test and it's going to fail. In this case, it's going to fail because it doesn't compile. That's going to cause me to have to create a heart class and add a replenish method. Even if it's a stub, it's enough to get the test to pass and to get some new code. So as you can see, my IDE is complaining, heart doesn't exist, replenish doesn't exist. I'm going to create the image. Another thing to note here is that these are social tests. If you're familiar with working effectively with unit tests, it's a great book. I recommend it. I'll also link that. The author talks about social tests and solitary tests. Social tests are ones where you actually bring in instances of I forget what he calls it. Basically, other classes. You bring in instances of classes that are outside the class under test. Now, those, can be dangerous because if you change an implementation on another class, it could cause some tests to fail elsewhere that doesn't even, have anything to do with it. But in this case, because I'm really depending on Unity, I don't mind too much. I'm going to just make this social, and I'm going to rely on image and FillAmount working the way that I expect. Now, if something happens in Unity where they update the image class and FillAmount no longer works the way I expect it to, these will probably fail, but I'm banking on that not happening. A solitary test would be a test that uses mocks and tests behavior. All right, so I use this failing test to create my heart class, and I used it also to create my replenish method. It's a very simple method right now. Replenish, it takes a number of heart pieces. That's the amount of heart pieces it's going to replenish. Now that I actually have a strong idea of what I'm testing, now I can come up with a better name. This naming convention with underscores, I find it to be more readable. I've used every naming convention under the sun. Like, really, there's a handful of them, and this is my favorite right now. I don't know, I might change that, but really, I think this is way more readable. I've tried Pascal case, and I think Pascal case is the worst for me. It's so hard to read. This, I don't know, it's just so, I can just glance at it and really grasp what I'm doing from the IDE or from the test runner. So here what I'm testing is when you pass 0 to replenish, it sets an image with no fill to no fill, or 0% fill to 0% fill. And in the end, this is real. That's what I want the implementation to do. So while that replenish method has nothing going on in it, technically this is a good test. The code's working the way I expect it to, and I'm going to go ahead and try to run it. Oh, okay. For sure, I run into lots of issues here. My IDE doesn't want to compile for some reason. I still don't know why. I think the project got out of sync. Sometimes Unity will get out of sync with Visual Studio, and it'll have to do a reload. You can force it. In this case, I just fumble around for a little bit, which is fine. It'll give me a moment to talk about doing tests in the IDE. So, Visual Studio has a test runner, and I'm using a plugin called ReSharper. It's great for Visual Studio. I highly recommend it. And ReSharper also has a test runner. The problem is you can't run Unity code outside of Unity itself. So eventually I'm going to try to run some tests, and you'll see that it won't work. It's going to fail, and it always throws an error called eCall and says something about security. I've looked it up on Google. I haven't found out 100% why you can't do it. I haven't really chased it down. Eventually I will. But I think for the time being in this series, I'm just going to switch on over to the IDE. I'm going to switch over to Unity. So you see here that I ran the tests and it passed. It did exactly what I expected. I called Replenish. I passed it 0 number of heart pieces, and it did not affect the image amount, which is what we expect. But that's not much of an algorithm. That doesn't really do what we want it to do. So now I need to tease out more, get more, and I'll do that by adding more tests. See, this is that test I was talking about. ECall methods must be packaged into a system module. You just can't do it right now. Hopefully Unity will fix that. Or maybe it's not even a Unity thing. Maybe it's something to do with how they build their DLLs or libraries. In any case, it's no big deal because I can always use the test runner in Unity. It is kind of a pain to switch back and forth, and ReSharper and actually the newest version of Visual Studio has a nice live unit testing. I use it at work in my day-to-day, and it's great. You can just update your code and it'll automatically run the unit tests, but it's fine. So the next test. Now I'm going to say when I pass 1 heart piece into the Replenish method, it's going to set an image with 0% fill to 25% fill. And that fulfills the requirement that each heart piece fills 25% of the heart. Or another way you can state it is that a heart contains 4 heart pieces. So I'm doing a little bit of duplication here, and I'm going to clean that up later. I've had mixed feelings about cleaning up duplication in tests because on one hand, it's a pain to duplicate, but you can take a look at a test and you can know exactly what it's doing without having to look for that variable to see what it was filled with. But on the other hand, sometimes your default values are going to be obvious, so it's not that big of a deal. So here the test failed, and it failed for a reason I didn't expect. I had highlighted it. It expected 0.25 but was 1, and that's wrong. Now I've fixed it. But was 0. And the reason why that was happening is because I wasn't setting image.fillAmount to 0. So one thing that's important is that whenever your tests fail, you need to make sure that they're failing for the reason you think. And in this case, I expected fill amount to be 0.25. And really, I expected it to be 0 because I hadn't implemented the replenish method yet. So now we're going to write kind of like a poor man's... Actually, this is pretty close to the obvious implementation. So basically, I'm going to set the image fill amount to the number of heart pieces that's passed in times 0.25. This isn't a complete implementation, though, because this doesn't take into account images that start with a fill amount that's anything other than 0%. So that worked, that passed, and I'm going to just basically clean up this magic number. I'm going to store it into a constant. Again, I'm using ReSharper, and I'm also using Vim, so if it seems like I'm kind of flicking around a lot, ReSharper is kind of doing a lot of work for me, which is a great thing to have. I definitely recommend you know your IDE and you know your tools. I feel like I know ReSharper pretty well, so you'll see me constantly generating pieces of code. I actually was thinking about it while I was filming this, like maybe I'm going too fast, maybe I won't be able to narrate, but it seems to be going well. So I'm going to push this right along here. Like I said, we're not accounting for images that don't start at 25 or at 0% fill. So now I'm going to say if you pass 1 into replenish For an image that starts at 25% fill, it should increase it to 50% fill. This is going to fail because my algorithm is incorrect. Right now, it's just setting image fill amount. It's not incrementing it. So I do the assert first. Now the assert first is something that I tend to do when I don't really have certainty about how I'm going to, or I don't have a vision for how I'm going to implement like the method or how I want it to look when I call it, how I want the API to look. At this point, I know what the API looks like. I already have the class, so I think it's a little redundant to continue doing the assert first because I know what I'm doing. But I just kind of kept it in there. I think I keep doing it for a while, but typically once I've got the class created and the method created, I won't do assert first. I say that because it can be kind of a pain with all these great tools like ReSharper. They try to autocomplete, and a lot of the time it's a pain in the butt because the autocomplete will fill it in with some like system library class it's just a pain. So basically all I had to do to fix that was that method was just adding plus equals. And replenish is done. So each quarter will be represented by 0.25. I feel like I accomplished that. I'm going to have to accomplish that same idea in the depleted method, but I figured out how to implement it, and I implemented it. So I feel like it's pretty good. You know, I got the idea down. Heart consists of 4 quarter pieces. I did that. I'm going to continue to do that. I have some sort of image for that. I'm going to have to make sure I do it in the depleted method, but I already completed that, so I feel pretty good. So I'm going to mark those as done by highlighting them as green. And then I thought of something. How does the replenish method handle negative numbers? In this case, I'm going to throw an exception. I think negative values into the replenish method are unacceptable, and I don't want some other developer or myself in the future to abuse the replenish method. I thought, do I need a replenish method, a deplete method? Maybe I could deplete by passing negative values into replenish, but I think that would really taint my API. I want to be explicit how I use these classes. So I'm gonna throw an exception whenever you pass a negative value to replenish, because that's just not how it's meant to be used. So here I know that I'm eventually going to start deleting these finished tasks. So this is just my own sort of housekeeping. You know, you do your own thing. This is also taken from Eric Dietrich and Kent Beck. I read a book, a test-driven development book that he did, and I think Eric Dietrich got it from him too, where you just kind of make a list of what you want to do, and that's how you drive your tests and your development. So yeah, I feel pretty good. The replenish method is done for the most part. I need to throw an exception when you pass in negative numbers, but before I do that, I've got all my tests passing. I'm going to get rid of some duplication. And I'm going to do that by introducing some class level variables, class properties to the replenish method class. This is pretty rudimentary. There's a setup method if you're not familiar with it. If you haven't done a lot of testing, setup will run before every test. It's an annotation you add to a method, and that method will be called before every test. I just call the method before every test, so I know. Yeah, call whatever you want. And I'm going to get the image in the heart. Or I'm going to instantiate an image in a heart. And this will allow me to clean up my tests by removing all this instantiation code and keeping just the assignment of fill amount and the calling of my method under test. So it looks a lot cleaner. And what I was saying before is that sometimes it can get a little out of hand if you do a lot of setup work that requires a lot of foreknowledge. When you have a test that fails, you really want to be able to just glance at the test and understand roughly what happened. It should be pretty obvious when a test fails what caused it to fail. And in this case, we only have an image and a heart, so I don't think that convolutes anything too much. But when you start doing a lot of setup code in your setup class, and you have to keep scrolling up and figuring out, what was I doing here? What do these values mean? Then it could really cause you a lot of trouble, and cause you even to just not unit test at all. I've found that sometimes when things get too out of hand, you just throw your hands up and say, I don't need this. I'm just going to write the code because I know what to do. Look at this replenish method. Look how easy it was. I could have just thrown it in and called it a day. But in the end of the day, the tests weren't so difficult to write. And now I have a history of what I was doing, and I figured out some sort of guidance as I went along. So that was the first episode. If you want to leave some comments and some likes or whatever, let me know if you liked it, if you have any tips or suggestions. I'm going to try to put these out every week or every other week if it takes me some time to do these voiceovers. I've already recorded a couple episodes, so all I got to do is do the voiceovers, and hopefully we'll be cooking and we can get through this and have something cool. I know in the next video, I actually show you how this looks in the Unity editor. I'll actually press the play button, and I added some input keys that will allow us to control the heart being replenished and depleted. So anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope this was informative, and I'll catch you guys in the next part of this series, test-driven development in Unity. Thanks for watching.